This Week with David Brinkley. Now, from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
Congress is always in trouble one way or another, but now it is in bad trouble. Many of its members have been exposed as having cashed 8,331 rubber checks in their own congressional bank, and as if that weren't enough, now exposed as chiselers who have not paid $300,000 worth of bills in the House restaurant. One reaction from a man in the street, quote, "If it was a normal citizen out there on the street bouncing checks, they'd be in jail right now." So the ugly publicity has revived an idea that's been around for some time. By law, a limit on how long Congress members can remain in office and move them out before they become entrenched. Obviously, there are disagreements about this, and so we have invited opinions today from 2 Congress members and 2 non-Congress members. We'll hear what they think. Some background on this from our man Jack Smith, and our discussion here with George Will, Sam Donaldson, and Tom Wicker here on our Sunday program. First, a little news since the Sunday morning papers. Newsday says Anita Hill, a former law professor and former assistant to Clarence Thomas, nominated to the Supreme Court, claims he sexually harassed her, but she says he never touched her. Another woman who worked for Thomas at the same time said she never saw anything like that and did not believe it happened. The White House said an FBI investigation showed the charge was false. Senator Paul Simon of Illinois, a member of the Judiciary Committee, says he thinks Thomas's nomination should be held up until this is investigated. Former Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota announced he would run for president for the 5th time. We'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life. And by ADM, supermarket to the world.
Look what ADM research has cooked up. An all-vegetable patty that contains dietary fiber, is low in fat, and free of cholesterol.
Some kind of limitation on some politicians in state and local offices, and one state now wants to vote limits on the terms of its congressmen in Washington. But that very likely would be held unconstitutional, since the Constitution says how long the congressional term shall be, and so it appears an amendment would be required. That's a long, difficult process. Before we go into all of this with today's guests, here's some background information from Jack Smith. Jack?
David, when members of Congress dress up like this, you know something is wrong.
It's time to expose the check-writing scandal.
2 weeks ago, a government audit revealed that members of Congress last year bounced more than 8,000 checks at the House bank without penalty. Then came the disclosure that 250 members still owe more than $300,000 in unpaid House restaurant bills. It was embarrassing. Republican Scott Klug tried paying with a check back in his home district in Wisconsin last weekend.
And the clerk, of course, looked at me with a snicker and said, "This isn't one of those rubber ones, is it, Scott?"
This is now a matter that is over and done with, and it will not reoccur.
After a week of debate, members were told to pay their bills, and the House bank was abolished. But the irregularities reinforced the poor opinion already held by most Americans about Congress.
If it was a normal citizen out there in the streets bouncing checks, they'd be in jail right now.
We need to hold them more accountable. I've got a few I'd like to vote out right now.
More and more now, this public cynicism that government's out of touch is manifesting itself in a national movement to limit politicians' terms of office, and thereby bring new blood into Washington.
This is Jessica with Initiative 553.
The most radical initiative to date goes before Washington state voters next month. It limits representatives to 3 terms and senators to 2 and is retroactive, so it would eliminate the state's current congressional delegation.
The problem is we have right now with career politicians is they're not willing to make the tough decisions, the hard decisions.
No more professional politicians. No more political fixtures. No more lifelong legislators so entrenched no other citizen can serve. No one should have a lifetime lock on office. Put a lid on it.
A similar initiative to limit state office holders passed in Oklahoma last year, in California too, and congressional terms were limited in Colorado, though it's still not clear that a state can constitutionally do that. But it's spreading to Washington State next month, and supporters say the term limitation will be on the ballot in at least 16 other states next year.
Term limits will weed out the deadwood.
Its merits were debated on cable TV in the Northwest this week. Supporters believe that term limits will make Congress more accountable, as the Founding Fathers envisioned.
We have self-serving people in there who totally think they're above the law. And we believe that term limits is one way to return to a citizen legislature.
But opponents say that's simplistic, and that installing amateurs in the country's legislatures will just make things worse.
All you're going to have is people that get elected and know how to smile and shake hands, but don't know anything about how the process of government works, and then you move them out and you start all over again, I think is really not going to serve the process.
It makes them more susceptible to any source of expertise, be it interest group representatives, be it permanent members of the bureaucracy, the executive branch, or members of the congressional staff itself.
It's time to give people more choice in government.
The president supports term limits, for it dovetails nicely with the GOP's goal to wrest control of Congress from the Democrats. But term limitation is nevertheless a bipartisan issue and reflects frustration with government at the grassroots that basic national needs are not being met. There is a perception as well that with its backdoor pay raises and its perks, the Congress is out of touch, and that members are corrupted by their reliance on special interests for the huge sums of money necessary to ensure the re-election of incumbents today. Dennis Eckert, Democratic representative from Ohio, is stepping down after nearly 2 decades in politics because he shares these frustrations.
The voters believe that their voice is not heard in Washington, that perhaps people don't speak for them here, or the only way to be heard in Washington is to pass around some money, to be part of a financial or power elite.
There's a story about the chaplain up here who, when asked if he prayed for the members, replied no, he looked at the members and prayed for the country. It's a joke, of course, but increasingly, that's the way the electorate views politicians here. David?
Jack, thank you. Coming next, 2 differing opinions on this. LaDonna Lee, board member of the organization Americans to Limit Congressional Terms, and Susan Lederman, president of the League of Women Voters of the United States. In a moment. Ms. Lederman, thank you both for coming. Happy to have you with us.
Good morning.
Here in the studio are George Will and Sam Donaldson, both of ABC News. Now, Ms. Lee, you're for the term limitation, I gather. Now, tell me this. If we, by law, force a number of congressmen out of office and replace them with somebody else, how do we know those we get will be any better? They may be worse.
I don't think they could be any worse, but I think if we got congressmen here who have lived in the real world, have gone through the recession, the rest of us have this last year, have had to meet a payroll, that they may take a different approach to legislation than what we have with career politicians.
You saying that with a term limitation we wouldn't have recessions anymore?
No, but I think maybe the government would be doing more to make sure the economy was functioning instead of worrying about $3 million for midnight basketball leagues.
Does everyone know about that? That's Congressman Pat Schroeder of Colorado, who is advocating money for nighttime basketball in parts of the country where kids should be off the streets. Now, Ms. Lederman, you're opposed to it.
Yes.
Why? Congress is not doing much of a job now, is it?
Congress needs help and needs to be, I think, more effective. But term limitations will not produce that. Will produce a less effective Congress vis-a-vis the president. It's not too long ago that we worried about an imperial presidency. Certainly, we don't want to weaken Congress as an institution vis-a-vis the presidency.
Why? Why don't we?
Why don't we? I think Congress is the people's branch. And we weaken really the power of people ultimately if we vest too much power in the executive. So our founding fathers thought, and so we believe.
Well, the British have an executive that's very strong. Get along quite well with it.
Well, not our experience. I think it would serve us badly. It's too broad-based a reform. It does not target the reforms we need. True, Congress is beholden to special interests. Let's have campaign finance reform to get rid of those special interests.
But almost any limit on the amount that can be spent in campaigns is going to help incumbents, will it not? In the first place, they'll write the limits and are not apt to hurt themselves with what they write. And then they'll still be able to trade on their access to television and radio and the franking privilege and the general conspicuousness of public office and the free travel and all the rest.
Agreed. But what we need also is some public financing to level out the playing field so challengers can more equitably compete. And that's not the only remedy we need to fix our system of elections. We need better debates. We, I think, need to get away from the negative campaigns and have issue-focused campaigns. There's a great deal that does need to be done. Term limits are not the solution.
Ms. Lee, the big question, and it's unanswerable in the abstract, is what happens to the sociology of a legislature if you have term limits? Who runs? What kind of person? At what point in their adult life? What's your intuition?
I think we'll see everything. I think you'll see more people having an opportunity to run, people who will really look at it as public service and come for 2 or 4 or 6 years. I think you'll see an opportunity for more women and minorities to run. And I think one of the great byproducts that we will have is that because the system will be so competitive, we will have a far better field of presidential candidates every 4 years, which is something I think we would all be very happy about.
Well, the big argument, I guess, against term limitations is that it limits experience. And most of us, when we go through life, look for a dentist that really's been there for a while. And we want to deal with a banker who knows the business. How do you answer the argument that by limiting terms, you're saying that the people who write our laws, though, we don't want them to build up experience out once they get to know where the men's room is?
Well, I think it's the wrong kind of experience. Knowing where the men's room, if they can't figure that out in the first week, then we've got real problems. But the experience we want is everyday American life. There was a House Ag Committee not long ago, not a single member, congressman, knew the price of a gallon of milk. And that's the kind of experience that's missing up here is what real America's all about.
I disagree. I don't see that you necessarily get people who would take time off from their routine jobs for a term in Congress who would know the price of milk. Indeed, Nelson Polsby, political scientist, said who you'd get to run would be the rich, the old, and the bought.
Well, there's another question, and that is how people vote. I take it from your opening presentation, Ms. Lee, that whatever you think of the peccadillos and misdeeds of individuals up on Capitol Hill at the moment, your main objection is to the way they legislate or don't legislate. Now, there's an argument that Charles Rangel, who's the congressman from Harlem and who votes for welfare programs, if you cut him off, the next person from Harlem will vote for welfare programs. And if John Dingell isn't there to represent the automobile interests of Detroit and vote against clean air laws, the next person from Detroit will vote the same way. So why do you think you're going to change general voting patterns?
I think that what you get is truly a citizen democracy and a more representative Congress. You
mean GM won't have someone representing them?
GM will have somebody that they will be pounding the doors and saying, can I, here's what I need, and hopefully those people will be listening as our representatives do. But there will be less of the good old boy network. They will be weighing GM's needs against the reality of going back and running a business when they leave Congress.
Ms. Lederman, why don't you address that? With the following in mind, say you had 2 term limits for senators. That would mean in the last 6 of the 12 years, he'd have no particular reason to listen to GM, would he? He's not that interested
Unless
in
he
getting
wishes to have a job with GM. He's looking to the next job rather than to serve the people.
Is that your feeling?
I think that's our concern and the concern of a number of people, that indeed this is a system as open to corruption as any, and that there are better ways to get at the corruption that we're concerned about.
So you want career politicians, is what you're saying.
I am not afraid of career politicians if the people have a voice in choosing them.
Ms. Lederman,
But they don't.
let me ask you, I think a lot of voters say the following, what's wrong with this picture? It's said if we don't have experienced professionals, we wouldn't have the good government we have today. What are we talking about, the deficit? The S&L crisis? I mean, a lot of Americans say, this is experience, give me a little novice.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
Again, the notion of the amateur who sort of puts aside the plow and goes to serve in the legislature is a very nice romantic notion. I think what we would have is indeed that short-term legislator not only beholden perhaps to special interests, but also to the expertise and staff, and being bombarded by a lot of expertise and perhaps not having a way to judge it.
The word amateur comes from the word to love. It's for people who do something out of love rather than what? Money, ambition, something else. What's the matter with that?
And to a great extent, considering the heartache that goes with serving the public, I suspect that that aspect of loving the job still needs to be there, even for people who serve for a longer time.
Regardless of the side you're on, and we've established pretty well which side that is, Do you believe that states have the legal right, the constitutional right, as Washington State is attempting now, to limit the terms of federal office holders?
I believe they have the right to instruct. We see Arizona where they have the right to...
Instruct? I don't understand. I'm asking whether there's a constitutional right for Washington, if it votes this November, to limit Tom Foley's term, that his term gets limited, or is it a constitutional amendment that would be required?
There's many different approaches being approached all across the way, whether it's initiative, whether it's looking for congressional action and citizen action. But there are many that believe that states have the right to instruct their members of Congress going back to the 1700s.
What do you mean by instructing them? In other words, Foley, we have given you an instruction, you'll darn well obey it, or else what? I mean,
your job as representative is to answer to the people of the state. And we see in Washington State where the congressional delegation has pledged $250,000.
Well, what happens? That's the interesting point. What happens if Washington State instructs Tom Foley, I don't mean to be picking on the Speaker, but other members of Congress from Washington State, that they are to step down. But in their districts, their constituents want to vote them back in and do so in the next election. Which instruction should be paramount?
Well, we'll see that settled in the courts.
I'm asking for your opinion.
My opinion is that I believe that the states do have the right to instruct the members of Congress to serve a certain number of terms, just like in Arizona, the state can instruct members of Congress to stand for recall.
So the state of New York would have the right to really instruct the citizens of Harlem as to Mr. Rangel's fate.
But
well, it's the citizens of Harlem that should have the ultimate right. This is a country and a government of the people, not the Congress.
And indeed, we need to strengthen the power of the people to make those choices.
George, what?
You're using the word instruct rather than bind. I gather you do have doubts as to whether or not it's constitutional.
I think we're ultimately going to see it battled in the courts. We've asked for many legal opinions. There's many people that are on both sides, and none of them are very willing to take a strong stance. So it's going to be decided in the courts.
Well, if the Constitution has to be amended, then the legislators have to, in a sense, kill themselves. They have to fall on their sword by passing that amendment. How do you get that to happen?
A lot of citizen pressure. And ultimately, it's why it's so tough, and it's why we're going the initiative process, because you don't see members willing to legislate themselves out of a job.
And
Letterman, I'll give you the last word. Time's almost up.
This is what bothers me. This is not the right remedy to our problems. What we need is energy, citizen input so strong that Congress does take the hard action and tackles campaign finance reform now, this year.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you both very much. Pleasure to have you. We wish you luck, whichever way it goes. Coming next, Representative Scott Klug, Republican of Wisconsin, to tell us what he thinks about this question in a moment. Mr. Klug, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Pleased to have you. First, the easy question. Are you for or against a term limitation?
For, and used it in a campaign last year to beat a 32-year incumbent in the district that's basically centered around Madison, Wisconsin.
How many terms would you allow yourself then if you were to write the law?
The model proposal is for 12 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate. Right. So 6 terms of 2 years in the House, 2 terms of 6 years each in the Senate. I haven't bought into the Senate side of the plan yet.
Some people think that's too long, 12 years.
It might be, but I think that's one of the difficult arguments for term limit opponents to make, is that somehow 24 years is a very short term of career service. It might find me somebody, aside from yourself, who's lasted in the television business 24 years. It's an awfully long time for any career.
You know how long he's lasted in this business. Mr. Klug, get out of here.
The country is in something of a lather this week about the bouncing checks on Capitol Hill. Tell us why it matters. Not a great deal of money involved, although some cost probably to the taxpayer, though it's hard to determine. But the country thinks there's something wrong with the mentality indicated. Do you think this is germane, and should there be an uproar about this?
Absolutely, because I think what bothered all of us, and there were 5 of us who were Republican freshmen who were the ones who got Congress and ultimately I think the country in kind of a lather about this, because it says something about Congress's instinct. As soon as the scandal broke about the bounced checks, the first inclination from Congress out of the gates is to quiet it up. I mean, we'll look at BCCI, we'll look at the October surprise 11 years ago. I mean, we'll look at anything in the country we feel like looking at. But as soon as this broke, it's over with, it won't happen again, end of discussion. And so we, from the beginning, said full disclosure, an ethics committee investigation, and closed the House bank down, which ultimately we got, and some of us, including myself, ended up with a pie in the face by the time it was done, because we'd done the same thing. You
passed a couple of checks yourself.
Absolutely, but the key thing in this is that we, Congress should lay the cards on the table and be willing to stand up for mistakes, and said, I goofed, And there are also some serious violations in here, which is what I think this whole fight will ultimately be
So
about.
you're saying there's a cover-up of something serious. Now, in the rest of government, if the institution didn't want to reveal it, you could go under the Freedom of Information Act and very likely get the information if Congress even didn't want to release it. But Congress, as so often is the case, has exempted itself from the laws the other people live by. Does that mean you're going to be stymied on this?
Actually, some of us are talking about trying to get the Freedom of Information Act to apply to Congress. For those folks at home, what the Freedom of Information Act allows you to do is to get records of any government agency. You can get John Sununu's airplane receipts, you can get Lynn Martin's desk calendar, you can get Dan Quayle's appointment book, but you can't get anything out of Congress. And obviously we said you can't touch the bank records, and now we've turned around and said you can't touch the dining room records either. And I think all of that should be available. And if it was available...
Explain what the dining room issue is.
There are now 50 members of Congress who have dining tabs of $1,000 or more, some of which have been pending prior to 1986, and the largest individual bill we hear is $15,000. Now, if those records had been available to the press and available to the public, those bills would have never sat around since 1986. That it would have been paid 30 minutes later because it would have become an issue in a campaign, as this whole check bouncing scheme is going to become.
Let me ask a question about motives, and let me lay the predicate that people who would criticize your position would lay. You bounced checks yourself, right?
Yes,
you
two
did.
of them.
Bounced 2 checks. But you think you're a good guy? You're not dishonest?
Well, $35 or something like that.
It was $50, but yeah, I think
okay, so you bounce checks, but you don't think that you're fundamentally dishonest. I would take it then that you would say that the others who bounce checks, most of whom, because that's the makeup of the House, were Democrats, are not fundamentally dishonest. Or would you?
There's a distinction, and I think
between you and the Democrats?
No, between those of us who did kind of inadvertent, stupid check bouncing of $25 or $50, you know, and anybody who's bounced a check back home knows how stupid you feel. It's like getting involved in a fender bender. There's a pittance limit. Let me finish.
I've bounced checks, so it's not a question of holier than thou.
Okay,
but I'm just wondering whether that's your attitude because the Republicans see this as a way to attack the Democratic majority and get what they've been, and arguably rightly, wanting for, 30, 40 years, and that is a Republican majority.
When we started this a couple of weeks ago, we didn't know who was involved, including ourselves. And there's a distinction between those of us who did inadvertent, stupid check cashing and some people who've been accused of bouncing a single check as large as $23,000. The largest single deficit we've heard in an account is $33,000. And those are very serious allegations that I think have to get to the Ethics Committee.
But this bank is not a bank like a regular bank. You're not bouncing a check as I do if I bounce it on Riggs National. This is your bank that you had set up there for those of you who deposit your paychecks.
Which we are all required to do, incidentally.
That's correct. And it's not costing stockholders. It's not costing, you say there are government charges. What does it cost the taxpayer?
Well, the bank is obviously run by
It's not taxpayer money in there that you're using.
In terms of the money that's in the account itself, apparently not.
So I mean, it's a different type of institution.
Sure, but it still speaks to the fundamental attitude of Congress, that we've given ourselves a whole wide range of privileges, including this, including the dining room. I mean, you can't leave a tab laying around for 5 years and expect not to get called on it. And it goes everywhere from fixing parking tickets all the way
Well,
to...
is this your argument for term limitations? Because these members presently in Congress have acted this way. That again, the question is, will new people coming in, will they not bounce checks?
Sure, because I think the first inclination
The bank is
again...
closed now, isn't it?
Well, sure.
Well,
the
I'm
first
using that as a
inclination...
metaphor. They'll be squeaky clean.
But the inclination of Congress this time around was to quiet it up. And I think if you have people in there who are not worried about it being a campaign issue, they're going to say, lay the cards on the table. And for those of us who did something stupid, we've all got to spend time at a dunk tank back at a county fair, as we should, and try to argue our constituents for this and take the blame. But for the folks who were involved in some serious improprieties, I think it smelled of a cover-up. And I think there's the same kind of range of gray in the dining room scandal. You've got some members who've left $5 tabs gone unpaid. You left people who've done $15,000 in tabs unpaid.
Do you have their names?
No.
There's one of your colleagues will be here in a moment to argue the other side, I think. And one of the points he makes is that you have a lot of turnover in Congress anyway, that in the last 40 years, most members of Congress have served less than 12 years anyway, so what's the big problem? What's your answer to that?
That there's still a core group that stays and maintains control over the institution. And I want to take a little bit different tactic than your prior guest about what it does to elections down the road. I think a lot of people who are very qualified right now to run for Congress and serve in Congress decide not to do it because they understand the seniority system. And if you're a successful business executive, teacher, farmer, whatever your business might be, and look at Congress at 40 and decide to really make a difference here, I've got to stay 25 years. You have now kissed your other occupation goodbye. In contrast to top cabinet officers, where you go, serve as kind of a window of opportunity for your country for 6 years or 8 years, and then you go back to what you did before as a living. And I find it ludicrous to argue that somehow members of Congress have no career after this. But they should have had a career before they went there in the first place. And certainly I think anybody in Congress with the experience and the breadth they have can open doors in 1,000 different places.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
very much.
I appreciate it.
Enjoyed having you.
Thanks.
Glad you came. Good luck. Coming next, another member of Congress and another opinion from Representative Vic Fazio, Democrat, California, in a moment.
People love the convenience of fax machines. What most of us don't like are funny paper faxes that curl up and are hard to read. That's why Xerox makes more kinds of plain paper fax machines than anyone else for documents that are easy to read and a pleasure to handle because they're on good old plain paper. Plain paper fax machines from Xerox, the way to put it together.
Putting it together.
Faxing, scanning, copying, printing. Xerox, the document company.
Dean Witter believed one thing that should distinguish his brokers is their ability to listen.
Listen not only to what our clients say, but what they mean.
I have a vision about retirement. I know
each client has a level of comfort.
You know me. I'm a planner.
There is no greater dividend a firm can earn than the confidence of its clients.
You've helped me make some good decisions.
There are many ways to measure success.
We measure success one investor at a time.
Mr. Fazio, thanks for coming.
Thank you
Glad
for having
to have you with us. You're chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. You like things the way they are in terms of term limitation. You like it that a member can come in and stay forever if he can get reelected. Why are so many people disenchanted with Congress and looking for change?
Well, I think Congress realizes that we've had a kind of bad week and that change is required. I think, contrary to what Mr. Klug said, we've acted very precipitously to close this bank and to send all these individual problems to the Ethics Committee to be reviewed. I think Congress is very much in keeping with the tenor of the times in the sense that it understands how easy it is for the public to be angry and frustrated about a system that seems to benefit us unlike any that benefits them. So aware of the fact that Congress has traditionally played this role in American society.
Well, it is not only that. I wouldn't call it a criminal class. Mark Twain was joking, of course. But what about the fact that we're up to our ears in debt, rising every year, paying out billions in interest, such things as S&Ls, which are Congress's responsibility, run on. We keep getting...
Well, we are closest to the people, and I think as a result we get the immediate reaction of people who maybe even in this case of S&Ls unhappy about a regulatory policy that might be more properly focused on the administration. But, you know, Congress is an institution that's constantly changing. People don't perceive that. The average member serves 9.5 years. There have been 500 new members elected to Congress since I came in 1979.
But some of
this is an institution that's always in turmoil in a sense, and I think that's part of the essence of why we ought not to change it. We ought to let it be this constantly evolving mix of a very disparate country. That's what is the essence of the People's House.
There is a lot of turnover, but there's precious little turnover because someone loses an election. Let me give you some numbers, Congressman. In 1990, 79 members of the 435 had no major party opposition whatever. 158 had opponents that spent less than $25,000. That's no opposition. Another 132 had twice as much money as their opponents. That means 369 were unopposed or financially unopposed, which means at most, 67 members were opposed.
Well, George, I think the solution is to go after the method of electing people. If you want competition, as I do, and I think it's healthy for the democracy, you've got to come up with a system that provides an opportunity for people to get into the game. Now, Scott Klug got in the game because he'd been an anchorman in Madison, Wisconsin for 2 years and had name recognition. Others don't have that opportunity. So I see public financing, a modest amount, not the totality, but a portion of what a member has to spend in a campaign, as a way of getting people into the game so that they can begin to compete. You know, incumbents have a lot of liabilities, too. They incur them every day they vote on the House floor. And I think that's an appropriate way to build in more competition. But 80% of the people serving in Congress today have been there since 1974 and no longer. Sure, there's a group of people that serve 20 years or more, but they're not a large group, and they're increasingly limited by the ability of the caucus to vote out chairmen who've outlived their usefulness. We did that with several individuals in the last cycle.
Congressman, let's stipulate that you're a great American and interested in the national interest. The same can't be said of everyone else up there. Now, when these guys and gals get around to writing the rules that will change how we campaign, is it conceivable they're going to write rules that don't favor the rule writers themselves?
Well, if the system is so skewed as it is right now, why would we want to inject public financing? Why would we want to limit what PACs can contribute?
To buy off term limits?
Well, I don't think so. I think this movement has been coming long before term limits was created by Eddie Mai as a Republican Party effort to really destabilize the Democratic majority. And while I agree that in Washington State today we have a mix of people supporting this, the funding is all coming from Republican sources who want to end the Democratic majority in Congress.
Coloradans limited the number of terms their state legislators can serve, and they have big Republican majorities in both houses.
That's true.
It's not partisan.
That's true, but I think the movement that you see out of Washington, which is funding the effort in Washington State right now, is clearly coming from Republicans who wrote it into their platform in 1988, despite the leadership of people like Henry Hyde and Mickey Edwards and Bob Michel to oppose it. The rank-and-file Republicans see this as their chance to destabilize the incumbents. Whether they ever get term limits or not, it's a great campaign to run on.
If public financing comes in, it would probably make sense only with campaign spending limits.
Absolutely.
Now, aren't almost any limits going to favor incumbents because they're conspicuous?
I think the conventional wisdom is that limits favor incumbents, but if you really look at an incumbent who gets into a tough fight, he usually finds that he has to spend more money to defend his record, to get the word out against the 30-second attack spot or the hit piece in the mail. So there are an awful lot of incumbents who are not very happy about the spending limits, which are being discussed as part of the campaign reform bill that will be coming to the House floor in a few weeks.
Mr. Fazio, have you personally bounced checks at that bank?
I think back in the mid-'80s, I bounced a check or two, probably about the same number that Scott bounced in the first 9 months he was in Congress.
And do you owe or have you owed the restaurant for a lengthy period of time for bills?
Sam, I went into the office the other day and said, do I owe the restaurant anything? And they said, they owe us $400. Now, I can't figure out how that happened.
Okay.
I think it tells us something about the accounting system.
You're batting 500 then. You bounced a couple of checks.
Right. Carried the check over to cover it the very day we discovered it.
I understand, Congressman. I tried to put it to Mr. Klug to defend the fact that the bank really wasn't the kind of bank where taxpayers lose. But now I'd want to turn the tables and put it to you that you and the rest of your brethren are shooting yourself in the foot.
Absolutely.
Do you understand why Americans are upset?
Absolutely. Everyone
Well, then why do you do
understands.
it?
I think this is a system that's been in place so long nobody even knew how it was created. And the minute it became a problem, nobody really thought it was worth having. Let's bring a credit union in, or let's bring a Versateller in, and we'll take care of our needs
you're talking about the bank.
like anybody else.
I'm talking about a system of perks that the average American doesn't get. It's not just the bank. It's not just the restaurant. It's the fixed parking tickets. It's the special parking
Never
privileges.
had one fixed, by the way, Sam. Pay them all.
All right,
and I
but
think
I'm
a lot
not
of
going to use a
members of
shotgun
Congress
on
do.
you.
There are some individuals who have abused every portion of the system. Not many, but some.
Well, what are you
and they
going
give
to
us
do?
a terrible black eye
Well, what are
in the
you going to
process.
do, or can you do anything to police them? Because if you don't,
Well, I
George is
think
going to win on
this
this.
is a-
Term limitations are going to win.
Well, term limitations may win because of the absolute frustration that people all across the spectrum have with their government today, not being responsive, they believe, to an awful lot of problems we face. This is not a problem for the right or the left. This is a general frustration with government. Many of the people who support term limits have nothing in common.
But you can't
don't
police
agree
your
on any
colleagues, can
solutions.
you? You don't
We
police
can.
yourselves.
In fact, in this Congress, we have done away with honoraria. We've limited gifts. This is a Congress, and the last one, that's gone further in reform than any that you can find in the last 25 years.
Mr. Fazio, thank you. We'll watch and see how this turns out. In the meantime, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Pleased to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Coming next, our discussion here, and joining us will be Tom Wicker, columnist for the New York Times. In a moment. About which honest and intelligent people can differ. So I'd like to hear ours. George, what do you think? Are you for term limits?
I am, and I'm
Members of Congress?
differing with myself. I've written columns on the other side. The accumulating...
Yeah, you turned...
The accumulating weight of evidence, not even I am impervious to evidence if it's heavy enough. One of the things that got me was the Proposition 140 fight, the term limits in California. I had always said that if you bring in rookies, as they're stigmatized, as citizens, to be in Congress instead of professional legislators, the interest groups would feast on them because they'd be naive. The interest groups came out of the woodwork to try and defeat term limits in California for the same reason that the subject of interest groups petrifies and panics or term limits petrifies and panics interest groups here in town. They've got these guys wired, rented, bought, and paid for.
Well, they've already hired the Congress as it is, and they don't want to have to hire another one. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
I think term limits are a very bad idea because the antecedent principle on all of these arguments about whether experience or whether they rip off the public is what is democracy all about. And democracy is that we get to govern ourselves by electing the people we want to elect. And if I tell you, George, you may like your congressperson, but I'm not going to let you elect that person past 2 terms or 4 terms. What are we doing to our democracy?
Sam, the Constitution is full of limits on the right of people to do things. The Congress may not, the representatives
wait a
of
moment,
the people...
you shifted the right of people to do things. I'm talking about the right to govern ourselves.
The people are not allowed, no matter what their opinion is, they're not allowed to establish religion, abridge freedom of speech, there are all kinds of limits on what the public will can do.
You're not allowed to elect a president more than twice?
Yeah.
Those limits are limits on people to prevent them from oppressing the rights of others.
There are limits on
I am
democracy.
talking about the fundamental right to govern ourselves by electing a person whom we choose.
Sam? Does that limit our right to govern ourselves?
A majority.
Well, I'm against the 22nd. I'm against the 22nd Amendment, which cost the Republicans 3 third-term presidencies, assuming Nixon had not run out of town 1 step ahead of the sheriff.
Tom, what do you think about this?
Well, I hope I'm like George and not impervious to evidence, and I do think that the evidence is mounting and becoming more compelling for term limitations. I remain, however, unlike George, reluctant to go to that solution, if that's what it is, because I think, and even in the face of the evidence, I think that the problem is not so much with Congress as it is with us. And I think that the kind of people we elect now to do the things that they do, which I agree are in many cases disgusting, I think that's the kind of people we'd elect after term limitations.
Well, in other words, Tom, if I read you right, you're saying that if people are dissatisfied with their congressperson for whatever reason, they vote the person out.
I think so, and I don't agree with the proposition that Congress has so built itself in that you can't vote them out. If we wanted to do it, we could do it. We too often don't want to do it, and polls show
why don't we want to do it?
Well, I don't know, but polls show that people who think Congress is a terrible institution think their own congressman is pretty good.
But that's why we don't do it. The people who re-elect Charlie Rangel in Harlem do it because they think he represents their interests.
You know, there is something to be said for the compulsory rotation in office simply because it forces people to go back and reacquaint themselves with the way other people live. George McGovern, who I happen to like and consider, I'll explain.
Go back home for a while.
Well, George McGovern, who I consider a friend and a good man, after he left Congress, after 18 years in the Senate, went to Connecticut to run an inn with a restaurant in it, and I think it failed in the end, but most new restaurants do fail. That's a common thing, no judgment on George. But he said, whoa, gosh, I wish I'd had some idea when I was in Washington of the paperwork and the government regulations and all the other impediments.
Well, do you run a
business.
restaurant?
No.
Have you run a restaurant? Do you not write about paperwork in government? If I were to say, well, you've been a pretty good columnist all your life so far, but let's face it, you don't know the real world, George. You don't meet a payroll.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm sorry, I meet
you meet your own payroll.
And my staff.
But in fact, we're going to change columnists. And if I don't like your column, I should stop reading it. And if enough people stop reading it, then, of course, you'll be dropped.
It could happen.
Well, it's the same way with members of Congress.
Well, I think this
For people to say we're going to have to put a term on our own
This is my third career, by the way. I've had other careers.
What about this? Member of Congress, elected, moves to Washington, buys a house in Bethesda or somewhere, puts his kids in the school here. His wife becomes, if she doesn't work, she becomes involved in local activities of various kinds. He becomes a Washingtonian. He is no longer a Kansan,
This is where he works, right?
Wherever he came from. Is that healthy?
Well, this is where Congress is. Now, if you put the capital in Topeka, I guess he could stay home. But he keeps a home in his own district.
Maybe.
Unless he's George Bush and has a hotel room in Texas. He keeps a home. He has to have the double homes. He goes back to the district, if they're smart, every weekend, unless they're, Matsunaga in California, or rather Hawaii, he goes back, he has the travel, he goes to all the Rotary Club things. If he's smart and gets reelected, he always shows up at the bar mitzvahs of the important people. I mean, you paint him as if this congressperson just sitting here in Washington, fat cat off the public payroll, that's nonsense, David.
It seems to me that we've got here really a value judgment question. It's not an absolute right or wrong. I can see many strong reasons for limiting the terms of Congress. But I think everyone has to come to a conclusion. Are those reasons compelling enough to take a drastic step in American life?
It is a drastic step, and it's a peculiar reform because I favor it, but I concede at the outset that the one absolutely certain outcome is bad. And that is we're going to lose some great legislators. The Moynahans, the Danforths, people like this would be gone.
Your first boss, Gordon Allott, I know you thought highly of him.
That's right.
Would you not like to have seen, if he had not been defeated, would you not like to have seen him remain in the Senate and not been cut off artificially by some term limitation?
I think that argument that we're going to lose a lot of special ability and talents, while it's certainly a true argument, I think that's the least argument against term limitation, because we'll re-elect some special abilities
let me raise one more thing and then go on to something else. If members of Congress do not stay here for extended periods, beyond 6, 8, 10 years, whatever it is, they become more and more dependent on staff. I believe that staff is already too influential in this city and has too much. That staff has been known to write laws that no congressman ever even knew about.
Well, they write most of them, particularly the tax laws.
No, I mean one that the congressman didn't ask them to write.
I was on the Senate staff. I know how that works.
Well, okay.
Indeed.
Do we have a George F. Will law or two that we thought Gordon Allott had done?
Term limitation on Congress will also result in a significant shift of power to the executive branch, I think.
It might.
The
one it may very well. I mean, you have to consider those things.
Be so fearsome. The president is elected in 50 states. No congressman is. And if the president acquires a little more power, why not?
A little more power. Presidents already have enormous power.
Not as much as they might.
Not as much as they might, but not as much, and not as much as they'd want to have if they could get it.
Well, that's human nature, isn't it?
David, the most unfortunate aspect of this is that it has a superficial partisan aspect to it. You have to take my word for it. If the Republicans ran everything, I'd be for throwing them out precisely because the homogenizing process in Washington...
But would the Republicans in the House who are now banging the drum?
The homogenizing process produces this common mentality. There is something wrong with the fact that the year 2002, it is virtually certain, will be the 48th consecutive year of control of the House of Representatives by one party. Nowhere else in the developed, pluralist, industrial world is there any
the Democrats. What's wrong with it?
We're still having elections, and as yet there are no limitations. And we've got two new Democrats since the last time we talked about this, Democratic candidates for president next year, Kerry and Clinton, Governor Clinton of Arkansas and Senator Kerry of Nebraska. What about it? What do you know about them, George?
Well, it's a clear choice between Fleetwood Mac and Bruce Springsteen, because it was Bruce Springsteen. Well, no, that was Kerry used Born to Run was the music playing when he announced. That's Springsteen, and Fleetwood Mac was played by Clinton. What we have here is obviously a generational appeal, and both of them used that phrase, as Gary Hart did. I think it's a fairly sterile and barren appeal to people just as a generational block. But also, Clinton did say, and it's hilarious, listen to some of these people, he said that he is bound and determined to, quote, fight for the forgotten middle class. I have not met a politician in 25 years who talks about anything but the middle class.
Absolutely. They're forgotten.
They've remembered to raise their taxes pretty much.
Well, you know, if you took a poll among governors and more or less done that over the years, you would find that Bill Clinton is very highly rated by the other governors. That doesn't necessarily mean he'd be a good president. Senator Kerry is an authentic war hero, and that's never been a drawback in American politics. But it seems to me that what's happening here is the Democratic field begins to fill out. What are they now, 5 or 6 candidates?
About 6, 7, I think.
But no commanding candidate, no really dominant candidate. It seems to me that the likelihood is increasing that possibly we're going to have that unusual thing that no one winning a majority in the primaries, so that you would have 3 or 4 candidates go to the convention, contesting that convention. To me, that would be a very good thing for the Democratic Party.
Well, that's the Wicker theory of which you've written, but I think it's not going to happen, Tom. I think someone will win in the primaries. One of them may be Jimmy Carter.
Is going to happen, Sam, but it might. And I don't say it'll happen. I just say it seems to me that the more candidates who are not dominant figures that enter, the more likely it is to happen. And
well,
I think
another argument, may I say, although I'm about to give up, for Mario Cuomo to run. I mean, neither Kerry or Harkin has the eloquence, has the ability, I think, to move people as Cuomo does.
Nor the handicaps.
Well, Cuomo has some handicaps, but who doesn't?
Certainly does.
I mean, each one of those two gentlemen has
Is
a
this your
handicap.
last?
Besides, if you're going to sit around waiting for Godot,
Sam?
you know, I don't think you're going to get him. You better go with what
One
you
of
got.
them's going to become Jimmy Carter. It's going to be Harkin or Kerry or who?
Clinton or
Clinton, someone like that.
McCurdy.
Well,
Doug Wilder.
McCurdy. The House of Representatives, George, is not ready yet.
Gene McCarthy's running again?
He's
Oh, come
75,
on.
he's
Yeah,
running,
well,
and
okay.
I'm for him. Now, I don't think he's going to get the nomination, but I mean, what else does he have to do in life but
I
run for
don't
the
know.
presidency?
You want me to? Why don't we call him in and ask him?
I'm going to do a piece
We
on
now
it.
have commentary on Sam's political knowledge here. He's for Cuomo and McCarthy.
Well, I'm not
One
really...
will run, and the other is 75 years old.
Let me say what do you have as a commentary? It's not my political knowledge, but my handicap ability to put money on a winning candidate.
One final word. President Bush seems to have decided we do indeed still have a recession and still going. Is he right, George?
Well, I travel around the country and people say, gee, I know the recession's over, but not here. It's hard to say exactly when a recession ends. We're probably technically out of a recession. But
Well, the recession is not over. It's going to be sometime next year before we start having the real growth and people feel it. I agree.
Tom, last word.
Well, I've never thought it was over, and I think the White House statements and those that they sponsored earlier in the year were very much off the mark.
Thank you all very much. Time is up. I'll be back with a few uninvited and perhaps unwelcome remarks in a moment. Explain this. In Washington and across the country, there is angry public reaction to the news that members of Congress in their own private bank routinely cash rubber checks without penalty, and the news that they have chiseled a house restaurant out of $300,000 by going for years without paying the bills. Irritating, yes. But why are we so angry at the loss of a few $100,000 and not so irritated that Congress year after year runs our country deeper and deeper into debt by hundreds of billions? So much debt, the interest alone every year is more than $150 billion and rising. And what the American people get for their $150 billion is simply this: nothing. They take the money from all of us and then hand it over to the rich being those able to afford to buy government bonds. Their attitude is this: borrow the money, run up the debt, spend it, often foolishly, buy votes, get reelected over and over, and force our children and grandchildren to pay our debts. And we're angry because they don't pay for the ham and eggs. For all of us here at ABC News, until next week, thank you.